Hello students, welcome to the class. Students, in the previous class we learned about the membrane transportation, that is cell membrane transportation. Now in this class we are going to discuss about the cell wall. Then let us study what is the cell wall. So, here the cell wall means in addition to the plasma membrane, the plant cells have rigid outer covering called cell wall. So, here if it is a cell, so consider it as a cell. So, it is a plasma membrane. So, it is a plasma membrane. So, surrounding this one more layer it is present. It is a rigid cell. So, it is a rigid cell layer. So, it is called as cell wall. So, why it is called rigid? It is a not flexible layer. So, it is called as a rigid outer covering called cell wall. So, in addition to the plasma membrane, the plant cells have a rigid outer covering called cell wall. And we know that cell wall is present in only plant cells. The cell wall lies outside the plasma membrane and the cell wall is dead and freely permeable membrane. So, here the cell wall present outside the plasma membrane and the cell wall contain dead cells and it is freely permeable. Freely permeable means we already discussed about the permeability, that is it allows all the substances enter into the cell. So it is freely permeable layer. Then the plant cell wall is mainly composed of cellulose, which is a complex substance and provides structural strength to the plants. Here, cellulose is a substance, it is a chemical substance present in the cell wall and it provides structural strength to the plants. Then, there is a pectin-rich cementing substance between the walls of adjacent cells called middle lamella. So here between the walls of adjacent cells there is a pectin substance is present. It is a cementing substances. That substances is called as middle lamella. Then the cell wall formed immediately after the cell division is called as primary cell wall. That means after the cell division, the first layer is formed. The first layer it is called as primary cell wall. And usually most of the plant cells will have only a primary cell wall. And the primary cell wall is composed of hemicellulose substances. The primary cell wall is composed of hemicellulose substances. Then some type of cells also possesses an additional layer to the inner surface of the primary cell wall and that layer is called as secondary cell wall. So, most of the cells have primary cell wall, but in some cells it has one more layer inner to the primary cell wall and that layer is called as secondary cell wall. Then the secondary cell wall is made up of cellulose, hemicellulose and also another chemical substance called lignin. So here lignin help in structural strength to the cell wall. Then in many plant cells there are narrow pores called plasma desmata. Then the plasma desmata are cytoplasmic bridges through the cell wall connecting the cytoplasm of adjacent plant cells and allow the exchange of substances between the living cell contents. So here in this picture you can observe clearly that is plasma desmata. So here you can observe the first layer. So the first formed layer is called primary cell wall. Inner to the primary cell wall, one more layer it is present. It is called as secondary cell wall. The primary cell wall mainly made up of cellulose and the secondary cell wall made up of cellulose, hemicellulose and lignin. And in many plants, there are narrow pores called plasma desmata. So here you can observe this is called a narrow pore called plasma desmata and the layer is called as plasma lemma. So it is the layer is called the plasma lemma. So plasma desmata are the small pores and plasma desmata help in pass the materials into the cell. It is also called as cytoplasmic bridges because through the cell wall connecting to the cytoplasm of the adjacent plant cells and allow the exchange of substances between the living cell content. So the cytoplasmic bridges helps in exchange of materials or the substances between cell to cell. So from one cell to another cell, from the one cytoplasm of the cell to the another cytoplasm of the cell, it helps in exchange of materials through the pores. So, plasma desmata are called as cytoplasmic bridges because it helps in exchange of material between the cytoplasm of the one cell to the another cell, that is adjacent cell. Then, what are the functions of cell wall? The first function is that it acts as a protective layer to the all the plant cells. So we know that cell wall is present only in the plant cells. So it acts as a protective layer to the all the plant cells. Then it provides a mechanical support to the cells. So it gives a mechanical strength to the plants. Then it also determines the shape of the plant cells. So based on the cell wall, it gives a shape to the plant cells. So in some cells, most of the cells are hexagonal in shape and also the other cells have, that means other plant cells have different geometrical shapes based on the cell wall. Then let's move into the next one, that is plasmolysis. Students, in the previous classes only we studied about the plasmolysis. Then what is the plasmolysis? The process of shrinkage or contraction of the cell contents away from the cell wall when a living plant cell loses water through osmosis. That means when a living plant cell is immersed in a concentrated sugar solution, the concentration of the water molecules outside the cell will be lower than inside. Hence, the water will move from higher water potential region to the lower water potential region by the process of osmosis. That means when a living cells are immersed in hypertonic solution. That means when the extracellular fluid has higher concentration than the inner fluid, that is intracellular fluids. That means when the extracellular fluids have higher concentration of solutes than the intracellular fluid, then the solution is called as hypertonic solution. So plant cells, when the cells are immersed in the hypertonic solution, the cell show the process called plasmolysis. That means the contents of the cell wall shrink away, leaving the cell wall behind. So, in this picture, you can observe that is it is a normal cell. When the normal cell is immersed in hypertonic solution, it show contraction of the cytoplasm. So, in this picture, you can observe these cells are showing, so contraction is begin, so the contraction of cytoplasm is begins. Then the plasmalized cell, so the cytoplasm of the cell shrinks away from the cell wall. So in, including plasma membrane, the cytoplasm is away from the, so it is away from the cell wall. This process is called as plasmolysis. When a plant cell is immersed in hypertonic solution, it shows a plasmolysis process. That means including plasma membrane along with the cytoplasm. That means the cytoplasm along with the plasma membrane, it away from the cell wall. So it become shrunken. This is about the plasmolysis process. Then let's move into the next one, that is the differences between the cell wall and the cell membrane. The first one is, that is occurrence, where it present. So the cell wall is present only in the plant cells, whereas plasma membrane present in both plants and animal cell. So here the plant cells has only the cell wall. So the cell wall present only in the plant cells. It is not present in the animal cell. Then coming to the position or location, so it present outside the plant cells. That means outer to the plasma membrane. So here the cell wall present outer to the plasma membrane. It surrounds the plasma membrane. Then the plasma membrane is present inner to the cell wall in the plant cell, and it outside the cell in the animal cells. So here in animal cell, the plasma membrane only present, so it present outside the animal cell, whereas the cell wall present in plant cell. The plant cell contain both plasma membrane and the cell wall, so it is present outside the plasma membrane, so it lies outside the plasma membrane. Then coming to the nature of the cell wall, the cell wall is dead, thick and rigid. So here in the cell wall, it contains the dead cells and it is a thick and rigid. Whereas the plasma membrane contains living cells and it is a thin and flexible membrane. So whereas the cell wall is dead, thick and rigid layer, the membrane is living cells, so it is a living layer, thin and flexible layer. Then contents of the cell wall. So whereas the cell wall contains cellulose, hemicellulose and the pectin substances, whereas the plasma membrane contains lipids, proteins and the small carbohydrates. Then coming to the function of the cell wall, That is, it provides protection and strength to the plant cell. So it provides protection and strength to the plant cell. Whereas the plasma membrane, it holds the cellular contents and control the passage of material in and out of the cell. So here the plasma membrane show permeability, that is it is a selective permeable, so it allow the only required materials into the plant cytoplasm. So it requires, if it requires, then only it allows into the cytoplasm of the cell. So it is called selectively permeable membrane. So we can add one more difference, that is permeability of the cell wall. So the cell wall is permeable. It is freely permeable. That means it allows all the substances. Whereas the plasma membrane, it allows only the few substances. If it is required, then only it allows into the cytoplasm of the cell. So that is, it is a selectively permeable. So we can add one more difference, that is permeability. The cell wall shows free permeable, whereas plasma membrane shows selectively permeable. Then the function of the plasma membrane, that is it holds the cellular contents and control the passage of material in and out of the cell. So the plasma membrane contains all the cell organelles and it controls the passage of substances between one cell to the other cell. So this is about the differences between the cell wall and the cell membrane. So students, in this class we are discussed about the cell wall, so introduction of the cell and the process of plasmolysis, function of the cell wall and the differences between the cell wall and the cell membrane. So I hope all of you understood this class of students. For today's assignment, please take the questions. That is, the first one is write a note on the cell wall. So the first question is write a note on the cell wall. And the second one is write the functions of the cell wall. The second question is write the functions of the cell wall. And the third question is write a note on the plasmolysis. So, write a note on the plasmolysis. And the fourth question is write the differences between the cell wall and the cell membrane. So, the fourth question is that write the differences between the cell wall and the cell membrane. So, totally I gave 4 questions. Students, also make the points in your point books. So, thank you all students.